Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my initial review, my initial impressions for Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Just back from seeing it, so I haven't had a lot of time to really digest it. It's a movie I feel like I really need to see again because so much happened in it. It's a longer movie than obviously 7, and then so much more happens. It makes episode 7 look like a movie where like nothing happened, and it just is. It's a very, very eventful movie. There's so much to talk about. There's so many scenes where I need to go back and look at like the exact dialogue that was said and analyze it. Whereas I don't think there was that many scenes from episode 7 where you kind of had to go and like look at every little thing that was said. There was only like a couple of really meaningful takeaway scenes from episode 7, whereas here I think there's a lot going on. So I'm going to cover this. I'm going to start with my non-spoiler thoughts, and then I'll make it really clear in the video when I'm switching over to talk about spoilers. By no means is this review going to be comprehensive because, as I said, I've just seen it. It's going to be a bit all over the place. But yeah, let's get into non-spoiler thoughts. Overall, I liked it. I think this was, I think, the direction they needed to take after episode 7. The more and more I went back to 7, the more and more I think natural criticism of it came up for just one, for being very similar structure-wise to episode like 4, but also just not having a ton of information. They're not really being too many like information heavy, like notable moments. It really just being like a character introduction movie. So this being so heavy on, I think, a lot of information. They cover ground, they give answers to questions we were looking for, and they take it in directions you don't quite expect. Like there's a flashback sequence, and I didn't expect to get something like that in the Star Wars movie, and I was really happy that we got it. It was short, but I liked how they used it, and overall, I think in terms of the direction, I'm actually very hopeful like for episode 9 and where they go. I really do think this has, I think, kind of re-energized Star Wars for me after I think episode 7 really, I think, kind of brought things down a bit in terms of excitement. It's just like, okay, it's good, but it's not really amazing. This kind of brings it back up to that point, and there's so many directions they can take going into episode 9. It all depends on where exactly they want to go. So it definitely accomplished that idea of just having me excited again, because they got the big plots right with regards to the Rey stuff, Luke being properly reintroduced here, Kylo. Those three, I think, on their own really make the movie, but they were supported well by a pretty strong plot with I think Poe. I think had an actually really good movie, when I actually had fairly low expectations going into this because I didn't know what way they'd take his character. So I was very pleased with that. That whole plot with him and the new Admiral character and Leia, and the pursuit kind of sequence over the course of the whole movie, that actually was surprisingly interesting to go back to, when I think on the outside the idea of like most of the movie being like a pursuit, I'm tracking you type sequence, doesn't sound too interesting, but they made it very interesting. The other side plot with Finn and Rose kind of going on a mission to kind of get that group out of the situation that they were in, served as, I think, a nice kind of little distraction plot, because it allowed Finn to get development on his own. Rose was actually pretty good as a new character introduced, and their dynamic worked well, and then DJ was obviously introduced into that. While not a perfect plot, I don't think the most interesting plot by any means in the movie, it was still, I think, effective overall and worked. It's just that I do think Finn, I think they're struggling a little bit now to know exactly what they want to do with Finn, in that he'd probably be the one character of the, I suppose, 3 new main characters, or like 4 if you include Kylo in that overall group, who I'm not really sure where his arc ends in episode 9. I'm not really sure where they go with him. But that'll be definitely interesting to see exactly where they go. Obviously, the big stuff happens with the likes of Snoke, Rey, Luke, and Kylo, and that's where a lot of the surprising stuff happens. The directions and I suppose intent with regards to how they view the Force, dark light side balance, and just character directions. That's where all the big stuff happens, and I think overall I was very, very happy with where they went with it. Kylo, I think they had a lot of directions they could have gone with Kylo, but I'm pleased with the direction they took come the end, and I think it's going to make Episode 9 very, very interesting. Rey as I suppose our main character hero, really, I think another really, really strong performance. That I think she remains my favorite character from this new kind of trilogy. So another strong movie from her. Luke was so interesting the entire movie because it really felt like this was the first time like he was an actual, I suppose, interesting character. Not to say that Luke is like boring in the originals, but like it's a very simple type of character, Luke, in Episode 4, 5, and 6. There are obviously moments of struggle for him, but for the most part it's a fairly standard, main hero type dynamic. Here though, they make him so much more interesting because of his views on the Jedi, his views on how he may or may not train Rey, and just the decisions he makes constantly over the course of the movie. It makes him an interesting character of just the thing that they bring up in the movie, the idea of like the Luke that we actually have here versus Luke the legend that everyone knows and thinks of. So that was, I think, really well done, and just some of the things they brought up with regards to the training of Rey and Luke's intent kind of behind teaching her, plus how they linked like Rey and Kylo's arcs over the course of the movie, I thought was really well done and definitely made it the best arc in the entire movie. So to wrap up really quickly my non-spoiler thoughts, while it's not a perfect movie because of some of the stuff they did with some of the other characters, which I'll get into talking about in the spoiler section, for the most part, the positives completely outweigh the negatives, and there were some really, really great moments that really kind of had me going like, yes, this is the sort of stuff I was wanting from a new Star Wars trilogy. That, to me, in a way, this movie kind of saved for me the sequel trilogy, because as I said, the more and more I went back to 7, the less and less I liked it, just because there was very little substance to that movie, and there's so much here that I'm really going to have to, in this initial review, severely limit how long I talk for in the spoiler section. So be aware now that I'm talking about spoilers from here on out. I'll have a little thing up on the video for the rest of it to kind of signify that I'm talking about spoilers. But if you don't want to get spoiled about The Last Jedi, if you haven't seen it yet, this is about time that you leave the video, because I'm getting pretty much straight into the big spoilers for the movie. So yeah, let's jump into that. With those kind of criticisms for certain characters that I want to talk about. Those two characters are Supreme Leader Snoke and Captain Phasma. Captain Phasma, I think, was probably the bigger disappointment in a way, because it felt like they'd taken the criticism of her portrayal in Episode 7 on board and would fix it in Episode 8. But they didn't. They basically did almost the exact same use of her in this movie as they did in the previous one, of like, she appears in like 2 or 3 scenes and just gets defeated, or in this case killed, in one of those scenes, and they just move past her, that she's not important. She's a little bit of a rivalry, a connection to Finn because he used to be a stormtrooper that she trained, but that's the only real connection they're kind of pointing to here. There's nothing of substance to the character. They sort of had the cool moment of just like her helmet getting smashed a bit and you can see her eye, but that was really about it, and then she just dies. I think based on the way they set up her armor, there's some opportunity for her to survive, but I really think that it made it clear at this point that she is I think that they just didn't have any idea for her. They realized after 7 that, like, the cool design, but, like, do we have space for her in this movie? No. Do we have space for her in this movie? No. Let's just end the character. So I still have to read the book. There's that still out there for me with Phasma, and maybe they'll do some more stuff in, like, the expanded universe with her, but I just really didn't know what they were going for. Snoke is a slightly different story in that a lot of the disappointment, I think some of it comes from the fact that just he was such a theorized character. There was so much discussion about the mystery of Snoke. Who is he? What is he? Where does he come from? Why is he force sensitive? Blah, blah, blah. All that stuff, because the way they portrayed him in episode 7 was that he was the most mysterious character in the entire movie. That you were just like, okay, what's Luke going to be like? Who's Snoke? Who are Rey's parents? Those were the big questions after episode 7. And the Snoke question, unfortunately, doesn't get an answer here. He's killed in this movie, and I like the scene where he's killed, and I like that it's Kylo who kills him. I just really dislike that it came after not revealing anything about him. Because I think it's one of those things where you introduce a powerful, like, Force user, who's a dark side character, who's an older character who has control over another character to a degree in Kylo, who manipulated him to go from being, you know, like Luke's nephew, training to be a Jedi, to being this kind of evil character that we know him as. You need to give that some level of respect to, like, that character. And while I do think, you know, Kylo Ben killing him was the right move, no explanation at all about who he is, who trained him, how he knows about the Force and the dark side, the light side, how he knows about Darth Vader and the full story about that. Like, who he is, why he is the leader of the First Order. Nothing is said about him in the entire movie. And admittedly, you know, like, I've gone on record a bunch of times at saying that, like, I do not like the kind of common, you know, defense for these type of things. It's just like, oh, it's fine to leave some things a mystery. Admittedly, I don't like that. But I don't think it's an effective argument here, because it's just like, we're 2 movies in with this character who's just been killed. We don't know anything about him. The only hope for me is that they announce a book that's literally just called Snoke. And they just do a full novel exploring Snoke, his backstory, who he is, what he is. They give him the, you know, Darth Sidious, Darth Plagueis treatment from the book Darth Plagueis. I think that's what they need to do now. That they don't have to worry about, you know, cramming an important story for this character into one of the movies. Make sure you get him right in the expanded universe. And I hope that they don't wait too long to do that. I hope they don't wait until after episode 9 to do that. Because I think now is the opportunity. Because you told the backstory that you told in this movie. It's not the full backstory, but it's a good bit of it with Kylo and Luke. Now tell Snoke's backstory, because that feels important. How did he even meet Kylo in the first place? I think after this movie, that's probably the biggest kind of, like, question now. It's just like, okay, Luke took Ben, like, from Leia to train him separately away from her. When did he meet and become influenced by Snoke? Who is Snoke? I think, like, one of the Aftermath books or whatever it is, I haven't read them, sort of talks about the fact that he's sort of a well-known, like, potentially a politician type character. But again, the lack of explanation in the movies, I think, is shocking with that character. It's really, like, bad, I think. The way they killed him obviously was very interesting, and it was a great scene to see Kylo make that decision, and it made his decision, like, after this all the more, like, impactful, with that finally this person who's, like, pushing you more towards the darkness as you want to kind of seem to want to go to the light, he's out of your way. You should use this as an opportunity to redeem yourself. Go with Rey and attempt to somehow redeem yourself. Even if it's not fully possible, try. But instead, he has that moment. He has the one thing you didn't want him to do, and that is that he's finally got the big obstacle out of his way. But then all he sees is that power vacuum. I'm the supreme leader now. And the second Rey realizes that, I think it's the reason it's the moment where she, I think, realizes that, differently from the first half of the movie where I think she was very open to him, she was kind of making a connection with him, potentially romantic. I don't know if you can fully jump into that, but it was teased, I think, to a little bit. I think the second he made that decision to in any way look at the power and still siding with the First Order was the moment where that just shattered. It was meant to be, I think, that moment of just, oh, he kind of can't be redeemed now. Not in the way where, like, he's now a good guy going into episode 9. The only, I think, redemption that's probably on offer for Kylo at this point is some sort of a very last minute end of episode 9 thing where, like, just before he dies, he kind of realizes the error of his ways. Kind of the Darth Vader type thing. Because otherwise, if you turn him too early in episode 9 or something like that, who's the villain? What's the conflict? So basically making it so, like, that Kylo's in charge of the First Order. He is the Supreme Leader now. He's the enemy. He's in charge, and he wants to get rid of everything that represents the kind of the old kind of ways, which is another theme of the movie. That's really, really interesting, I think, going forward. That they've made that decision. And then with Rey having, I suppose, I think with Rey, I was actually surprised how they didn't overly emphasize her potentially falling to the dark side. They teased it in the sense of just like, okay, if you go to Kylo, you will be tempted to go to the dark side. But I think the way they shot all those scenes, there was always this confidence of just like, no, we are aware that our character knows how far is too far. There's some slight temptations there, of course, because there are issues. She wants revenge for what he did to Han and so on. There's the kind of fragility within her about the issue with her parents, which I really like. That the big reveal about that was just that her parents were nobodies. That she is just a very powerful Force user who happened to be born from non-important parents who are nobodies. That the big issues there is just that they abandoned her. That she felt alone. And when you have that moment of darkness of just where she seemingly would have been shown anything she wanted to, and what she's shown is just herself over and over and over again. And even at the end, it's just herself. It was just meant there to emphasize her loneliness, that as much as she's been like looking for her parents and who she is, that doesn't matter because they abandoned her. She's on her own. Like, it's herself. That the others don't matter. That she's not somehow mysteriously related to this character and that will show her her path. No, she's just Rey, and it's up to her to make her own decisions. So I actually really like that, and I think that's something I've been very consistent with since episode 7 came out. That I thought the absolute best direction would be to not make her the daughter of any important characters, especially like a Rey, a Luke, or a Obi-Wan or something like that. That was exactly not the way you needed to go, and that having her just be someone helps to counter this idea of the lineage of like the cursed lineage type thing of just any Skywalker is destined to go down this path or something like that. That no, here is a randomer who is the equal of Kylo Ren, who has the same potential as him, even though she's not a Skywalker. And here she is making this decision that it's not about lineage and so on. That Kylo could have made any decision he wanted to. Admittedly, the manipulation for Snoke didn't help, but he ultimately made the choices that he made. That a big thing in this movie is kind of Rey trying to tell Luke that I know you think you failed, that in a way you created Kylo Ren, but no, you didn't fail him as a teacher. He failed you because he chose to make that decision in the end. They add obviously some extra kind of drama to it with the whole idea of, did he ever tell you exactly what happened that day? Like Kylo asking Rey to seek answers to that question. What happened the day the Jedi Order fell, the new Jedi Order fell? And Kylo tells the story as like, Luke came to kill me in my sleep because he was scared of me. But then when Luke reveals the story, it's like, yes, there was like a second when I thought, is killing him the best way to do it? But then he doesn't do it. But the fact that he even thought that for a second is in a way the turning point for Luke that makes him realize that this isn't going to work, that he has these fears about what's happening, that he almost feels that he's failed Kylo just in making that reaction. That kind of, I think, as Rey brings up when she's angry at Luke, the idea that like, you felt that at that time he had made his decision, that because there was darkness within him, that he would side with that darkness. You made up your mind before he made up his, and in a way, you making up your mind sealed that he was going to make the decision that he made. And I like that there's nuances to that about how do you interpret that. Did the Luke looming over him with the lightsaber for a second, was that the switch, or was it always there and he was just waiting for that opportunity? And I think that's what's so interesting about Kylo going forward, is that we've seen him be very vulnerable, that he is this very confused character, but he's making a lot of wrong decisions. So is there any hope for redemption for him, or is there not? And will Rey, at this point, want to help him find that, or anything like that? Because especially with Snoke out of the way now, it's this very confusing situation about what direction to kind of go in, because he is the villain, he is in charge of the First Order, and there doesn't seem like there's anyone else who could step up, so that if Kylo ever turned, that just eliminates the enemy basically. So it feels like it is all about being against Kylo at this point. So I'm very interested to see where they go with him. With Rey, obviously, I think it helps that she has kind of realized that, yeah, she is just kind of a nobody in this, and she can accept that now, that there is no need to search for her parents, that it doesn't matter who they are because they abandoned her, and she has other people who do care about her, and she has this new goal because she's a Jedi now. She's going to be a Jedi, the first of this kind of new group of Jedi, and I do like that kind of the movie being called The Last Jedi is kind of like, come the end of the movie, what you realize is that it means like kind of like multiple different things, of like it's kind of like a passing of the torch of like the end of Luke moving into Rey being the last Jedi, but it's also, you know, Luke as the last of this era of Jedi, and then, you know, passing it on to Rey to be the first of this new kind of era of Jedi, where it's not so focused on like the religious aspects and like the books and the history of what came before. That in a way this movie kind of tries to simplify what it means to be a Jedi to just someone who emphasizes the light side of the Force, rather than like an almost monk-like character who's part of this organization that's like a peacekeeping force across the galaxy, and has these different religious implications about what the Force is. Instead, it is this much more simplified thing of just, it is someone who knows about the Force and sees it for what it actually is, as just this kind of thing that connects everything, and they have ability to tap into that ability. But they always lean on the light side of the Force rather than the dark side. Whereas at the start of the movie, it was Luke trying to convince Rey that the Jedi need to end because they lost sight of all this stuff over the course of, you know, their history. That they made so many mistakes, I've made so many mistakes, the Jedi shouldn't exist because mistakes will be made. And so I do appreciate that, because I had a fear partway through the movie that what they were doing was that they were overly vilifying the Jedi to the point where they are now trying to basically mean that, like, going forward there will not be any Jedi anymore, that is just a thing that's gone. So I appreciated so much when what they did was instead just shift it to simplify it, so that the idea of the Jedi is still going to be a thing, but it's going to be a much more kind of free and open thing, in that I can see episode 9 ending with like Rey starting a new kind of era of Jedi with much more simpler ideals of just kind of emphasizing peace and knowing just the very kind of peaceful side of the Force, and not really trying to make it a religion as such. So that's really interesting. Again, this is another part of why I need to see it again, to like listen to the dialogue of like Rey and Luke in a lot of these scenes. The Yoda scene that really kind of surprised me when it happened, because I'm just like, okay, there's a few opportunities you could have had Yoda show up, and it's just like he appears and it's just like, yes, Force Ghost. I was almost shocked that they didn't do Obi-Wan and Yoda, but in the end I kind of got why they did Yoda himself, and that here is someone who was like head of the Jedi Council at the time when in the way the Jedi were at their best, but also at their worst in a way, in terms of their not realizing that they were kind of falling down this path that they shouldn't have been falling down, but that Yoda always, that even the Jedi, as much as you can criticize them perhaps at that point, they always were fundamentally about the light side of the Force, and they were just forced because of circumstances into the situations that happened. So seeing basically like Luke have this big meaningful journey, somewhat influenced by Rey, of just deciding that he has to burn down everything that the Jedi was before, but then he hesitates at the last moment, and Yoda is the one to actually like burn the tree down, burn the books down, to kind of end it, to signify this big kind of shift, and have it open up that opportunity for Luke to have that kind of big hero moment towards the end of the movie, where he comes in, talks to Leia, and then does that amazing stall for time, and the reveal ends up being that he was never there in the first place. His big kind of force power move over the course of the entire movie was this amazing astral projection that he could change from being physical to being like passed through from Octo, that he never left. Physical Luke never left Octo the entire movie, but he was able to transfer his like essence, kind of astral project himself to another planet, and stall for that amount of time. And while I think it was a surprise for me to have the moment of basically him pass on and become one with the Force, basically the death of Luke Skywalker, I didn't expect that, because I felt like, oh, he's going to be here and they'll have a bigger moment with him in episode 9 to finish it off. So it was a big shock to just end the movie with like, okay, Han's gone, now Luke's gone. How is Leia the last one left standing, given what happened to the actress? It's really kind of funny from that point of view. As for, I suppose, Poe's plot, I actually, in the end, liked it. The only issue I had with it was just that the conflict in Poe's section with the new Vice Admiral character ultimately came down to just lack of communication. That she didn't tell him her overall plan, and he made decisions based on the fact that he didn't think she had a plan, and that created issues, and that's why the two were at conflict for so much of the movie. I never like it when that's a plot point where it's literally just that you didn't tell him this thing that you had decided at that point for no reason other than that you wanted to show that you were a higher rank than him. Because there's this moment that makes you hate her as a character because you like Poe and understand what he's going for, where you don't understand what she's going for. Now, thankfully, they wrote her well enough that they were able to bring you back around on that character and have her make this heroic sacrifice in the end. Have her make some very intelligent moves. It's just, why didn't you tell him in the first place? Because the big kind of hero move that they make her do at the end, where she has the ship go into light space, but through the other ships, was so awesome, because you always see hyperspace from the perspective of the ship that's kind of going into hyperspace, and never really so much from, especially the angle they shot it from, of what it looks like to other ships when a ship goes into hyperspace and kind of passes kind of by them. And just to see like Snoke's ship kind of be there normal, and then just and then there's this like blue kind of speed line, just like devastation gone straight through the whole fleet. It was really incredible how it looked, and it was a great hero moment. And you know, I like that in the end they had a moment of respect between the two of them, and that it was her acknowledging that he actually has high potential, and him seeing and I suppose understanding her plan in the end, and be able to see that she was actually a really good leader. And it helped Poe to make his big leadership decision in the end, and kind of value life over the success of some sort of a suicide mission. So Poe actually got really good development in this movie that will, I think, really help him going into episode 9, when I think very clearly they're going to place him as the head of the Resistance, and whatever they do with Leia, either showing her death early on in that movie somehow, or just having her die in between movies, him being installed as the leader of the Resistance makes complete sense, regardless of what way they go about doing that. Because that's how I think impressive his development was in this movie. Because of the new main characters, Poe, I felt like, especially after episode 7, had like the least amount of potential, just because he always felt like just the pilot character. So this really shifting him to have this leadership arc worked so well for me. But so I suppose quick final thought. Episode 8, I really liked it. I think it has some flaws. The decisions with some of the characters were pretty kind of bad with how they wrote them. They didn't really feel like they had an idea for them in the end. But the strength of the main plot, the strength of most of the main characters, and just, I think, a sense of more information, bigger reveals, the movie feeling much more impactful and like emotional, intense, really helped me save the sequel trilogy. It has me so interested in stuff going forward, and I think that's the biggest compliment I can give this movie, of just it to me helped a very weak start to this trilogy, as well as being a strong individual movie on its own. And it surprised me in so many ways and impressed me so much, and it's good to have really good Star Wars back that has me kind of, I suppose, hopeful for the future of Star Wars, in that like they can tell better stories in the books, they can tell something really interesting in episode 9, and it's all, I think, because of the strength of this movie. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up my initial impressions there, because otherwise I'll end up rambling for ages and ages and ages. So they're just my initial impressions on the movie. I'll probably be seeing it another couple of times over the coming weeks, and I'll have other discussion videos about specific aspects of the movie. I'll probably do another sort of like more detailed review that will be full spoilers in a couple of days. So expect much more episode 8 content from me on the channel going forward. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.